What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Bougie Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Yvette. First of all, I'm so happy I played that intro, not that badly. I thought it was going to be a really big mishap, so I'm proud of that. And I'm so happy that you guys are here. Today is a very extra special show because we are talking all about not only my hometown, but my guest hometown as well. Youngstown. What's up, Vince? As I talked about my guest, I have Vince with me today, author, Youngstown resident, Vince Guererri. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, I should say Youngstown native. I'm in the Cleveland area now, but I still get back fairly regularly. I'll probably be back at some point this weekend to see my brother play bagpipes somewhere.
Hey, wait a minute. You can take the guy to Youngstown, but you can't take the Youngstown out of the guy.
Very true.
That's just how it is. One great thing about the story, I think, and us telling it is that there is a heart to the story. And that's why it's so important to me. Not only the story of the mob, and yeah, that's fascinating, but just the story in general. Real quickly, I want to talk about why I started the history of this. I'm always, who doesn't like the mob? We've all liked the Goodfellas and things like that. Crazy enough, and honestly, I did not know that this was happening when I was growing up. I thought this is the kind of stuff that seriously happened in movies. I've gone to the Briar Hill Festival so many times with my friends to drink wine and to eat, and never knowing the history of those streets. Jim Traficant, of course I know his name. Didn't really know too much about him, which is crazy because what Vince and I will talk about is that the mob pretty much ran all the way into the 90s, well into the end of the 90s, where I definitely was should have been remembering things. But, here we are now, and that wasn't my history in Youngstown, but it was the history of Youngstown. And also, I think what's hard about telling it is that you want to tell it the right way, and you don't know where to start because the mob history goes back for a long time. But what we're going to talk about is there was like a 10-year break, right, Vince, from the 60s, because when the mob was in Youngstown, they minded their own business for the most part, but then they got a little sloppy with there's the Charles Caballero bombing, and there was a couple other things that the mob kind of went away for a little bit in the 60s. Am I right?
Well, went away is not quite the best way I'd put it, but they definitely were able to conduct business with a little more discretion. There's always this idea. Bugsy Siegel once told Del Webb, the contractor that was working on the Flamingo Hotel, "You don't have to be afraid. We only kill each other." And I feel like that's one of the reasons that there is this fascination with organized crime, because it's things that they do to each other. And the problem with the Caballero bombing is, one of his sons was killed and one of his sons was gravely wounded. And these were kids, and they were regarded as innocents in this conflict. So that was the kind of thing that brought down a lot of heat. I mean, they had they had a whole bunch of federal investigators. Obviously, the state and local authorities were trying to crack down as well. So you kind of they kind of faded into the background. But the mob war in the 60s was essentially over gambling revenues. Basically, the story that I would always heard was it was about revenues from dice games. And there was kind of an uneasy truce. Youngstown obviously is halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and they kind of divvied up the territory really well. And there was kind of a certain level of peace up until the late 70s. There was a mob war in Cleveland, and there was that kind of filtered down into what was going on in Youngstown.
Right. And speaking of the late 70s, that's also when the infamous Black Monday happened in 1977. And that's where I want to start talking today with you on that day, starting at that day when they closed their doors. So what day was it? September 19th, 1977, if I'm correct?
That is to my knowledge as well. Yes.
Youngstown Tubing closed, and after 70 years, 50,000 people lost their jobs.
Well, what happened is the day they call Black Monday is when the Likes Corporation, Sheet and Tube, had been bought about 10 years earlier by a conglomerate, and it was the era of conglomeration. You know, a lot of companies were getting involved in areas that may or may not have been their corporate strength. But Sheet and Tube was actually bought by the Likes Company, and they had a meeting at the Pittsburgh airport on Sunday, and on Monday they announced that one of the mills was going to close at the end of the week. Obviously now we have, and in fact this is partially because of these kinds of closings, we have what's called a warn notice, where they have to give 90 days notice for something like that. But they did not get it in this instance, and so one by one, all the mills closed. Sheet and Tube's Briar Hill mill closed. Sheet and Tube's Camel mill closed. The company ultimately, kind of faded into the corporate graveyard. U.S. Steel closed their Ohio works, and that was thousands and thousands of jobs were lost, and there were many ancillary jobs lost too.
Yeah. Which up until that point, people were thriving in these jobs in the steel mills. They were making money. They were sending their kids to college. This is the time where, and downtown Youngstown, where they talk about was thriving, which I've never seen in my lifetime. People used to soften. Didn't even believe that there was.
What was happening in downtown Youngstown in the 70s was happening in a lot of downtowns. I mean, you were starting to see, downtown started to be places where people worked, but not necessarily recreated. I mean, there were still 2 department stores downtown, but the movie theaters there were falling on hard times. But yeah, it was a great standard of living. It was, I believe that it was one of the highest rates of home ownership in the country, and there was a very thriving middle class, working class in Youngstown that was able to, and many of them did make their money in the mills or in one of the nearby machine shops or one of the other factories. Obviously, there was General Fireproofing making metal furniture. There was Youngstown Steel Door, but there were all kinds of ways to make a living. And in fact, it was one of those situations where people would be able to. You talked about people putting their kids through college. I mean, there were people who could go to college and go to work in the summer and make their tuition payments for the year.
I want to show you something really quick. I don't know if you've seen this before. Let's just show you this.
Problem of plant closings and the loss.
Did I stop it? Sorry. I lost it. I'm having it right back. I just wanted to show you this clip that I found. The news near Ohio back in that time. So I want to start. So if you take yourself to that moment, and where we're saying where people were thriving, all of a sudden, without notice, like you say, they close the steel mills. Correct. So what's left but the mob, right?
Yeah, it was kind of bleak, and like I said, there was actually, and this was going on in Cleveland and Pittsburgh as well. There was deindustrialization. There was people were leaving the cities for the suburbs, and what happened in Cleveland is the mob boss in Cleveland died without denoting a successor, and a guy by the name of Danny Green saw an opportunity and started an insurgency, for lack of a better word. There was a mob war in Cleveland, and that in turn contributed to a mob war in Youngstown in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yes, which we're going to take apart. I'll be quiet. Right? I'm going to show you this now. I think I have it.
And the loss of capital is not unique to Youngstown, Ohio. It's a disease that affects much of the northeast part of the country. The light that we light today is a light to the nations. Today we're going to light the torch. Tomorrow we're going to relight the furnaces in the mill.
So this is back when
the coalition was calling today a new day for Youngstown, Bright Tuesday, compared to last year's Black Monday. Steelworkers renewed pleas for federal assistance in getting the Camel Mill reopened and restored lost jobs.
We are born and bred in steel. We want to demonstrate that we can produce the best steel in the world. We want to restore Youngstown as a
I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of that. We're not going to watch the whole entire thing. Just wanted to show like a little clip just to talk about a little bit about that. But let's go ahead and move on a little bit into how that at that time. Okay, let's talk about 1977. Now, who's up on the come up? Jim Traficant. So in Cricket City, which if you guys have not watched Cricket or listened to Cricket City, because you can only listen to it, it's on Apple Podcasts. You can find it anywhere. They talk about the beginning and at the beginning how the mobsters used to hang out at the uptown area in the bars, and how they used to watch Jim Traficant on television at that time. He was a local football hero. So this is someone that already has roots to Youngstown, and who doesn't love a football person already? So he's already that person. What's the first word that comes to your mind? I like to ask this when I say Jim Traficant to you.
Colorful. I mean, I feel like that's the most all-encompassing word. He was definitely very, very different from everybody else in Congress, and I feel like part of that is probably more than part of that was by design.
Yeah. I never got a chance to meet Jim Traficant. Boy, do I wish I did. The more I research him, the more here he is. Football. Is that him? That is him. Make sure it's not. Yeah. So Jim Traficant, he, like we were saying, came from Youngstown, was a football player, and then became a drug counselor. Used to go to the schools around the area and talk about drugs and the war on drugs. I remember hearing the story, which I talked about before, that he went to talk at the schools and the parents would come and fill up the auditorium because he was that charismatic. He had that type of personality that people just were intrigued with everything that he had to say. So what do you think about Jim Traficant? What do you remember about him? Let's talk about in the quarterback years, in the Jim Traficant drug counseling years before he got into politics.
Well, he went to Cardinal Mooney. Well, he graduated from Cardinal Mooney. I think he was actually in that first graduating class at Mooney, and I think he went to Wilson for a couple of years before that. Okay. Went to Pitt, played football there. The Steelers actually took a flyer on him when the NFL draft was like 18 rounds. They drafted him in like the 14th round. He had a bunch of knee surgeries by then. Couldn't latch on with the Steelers. Went out west. Tried to latch on with the Raiders when they were still in the AFL. Actually, couldn't make the team there. Knocked around, played some semi-pro ball for a little bit. He played for a team in Alabama, the name of which escapes me right now. But he came back to Youngstown, got a couple of more degrees. He was he was a drug counselor, and he was an assistant football coach at East High School. And I really wonder what would have happened if he had been able to have any kind of professional football career. I wonder, where his life would have taken him if he had gone in that direction. But his football coach at Mooney ran for city council. Jim Traficant was his campaign manager, and he got bitten by the political bug at that point. And well, you have a pretty good idea of how things went after that.
Right. And at the same time, we have Bob Kerner from the FBI, who is coming into Youngstown to investigate a big mob war that's happening right now. At this point, between the Cleveland and the Pittsburgh Mob. I want to talk a little bit about the Cleveland and the Pittsburgh Mob, because that's one thing about Youngstown. When I've learned is we all say the Youngstown Mob, but Youngstown really did not have a mob. Youngstown was the battleground, right, between the Pittsburgh and the Cleveland Mob, and they had mob bosses that ran Youngstown for the Cleveland and Pittsburgh Mob. But let's talk about some of the big players in that. We'll go over the Pittsburgh side with Jimmy Prado. I was just at Briar Hill, if anyone's watching and following along. And I went there because, and you even commented on that, but if talk about history, that's where everything started. And that's where Jimmy Prado and Lenny Strollo and the Pittsburgh, and obviously Joey Naples, the Pittsburgh side of the mob. And then on the Cleveland side, there's the Crabia brothers, right? Orly and Charlie Crabia. And I don't know if this is correct. This is what I've heard. One of the reasons that the war started between the Cleveland and the Pittsburgh mob is because Joey Naples went to jail. And when he was in jail, he met a guy, Pete Canonico. They became friends, and he told him that he could have the Trumbull Rockets. But here's the problem: the Cleveland group is what owned the Trumbull Rockets, so that got the Cleveland mob pissed off. And then here comes Jim DeRose, who that's another whole 3 podcasts, I think, who's I find one of the most unhinged people that I've ever been hearing about. Comes in, he takes out that Pete Canonico, the guy that was in jail. And it's all about the money, right? It's all about the money. You can't be giving away all the millions of dollars of money. Here comes this huge war now between the Pittsburgh and the Cleveland factions right here, 1979, 1980, right at the same moment as the come up of Jim Traficant, like all together. That's what brings us to the tapes that he described with. And but could you be in politics in this era without being talked to by the mob? Or the mob controlled everything. They had politics and everything. So if you were going in politics, wouldn't you have known at this point that you were doing that's your
No, you couldn't. I mean, it was it's very hard to fully describe how pervasive organized crime was, not just in Youngstown, but in a lot of major cities at the time. Those were the people who ran numbers before Ohio started its own state lottery in the early 1970s. Those are the people who might have ran nightclubs, who might have been heavily involved in labor unions. In fact, that was how Danny Green got his start, was with the Longshoremen's Union. And we know all the stories about the Teamsters. So it was really a pervasive way of life. And like I said, after the war in the 60s, there was kind of a truce reached to keep the peace. And the Mahoning Valley territory was divided up, and for a lot of reasons, like you said, for the unpleasantness with Joey Naples, and because
right here, there's Joey Naples. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's Joey Naples right there.
Underneath
it. I think that's a Crabia. That's next to Jim Traficant, one of the Crabia brothers. I'm not quite sure, but that's definitely Naples in the bottom corner. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
But it was one of those things where the mob in Cleveland was weakened, and there was a power vacuum, for lack of a better way to put it, and a lot of people saw a chance to kind of get a little more. Like you said, it's all about the money.
Agreed. That's right there. That's Jimmy Prado, and there cannot be a lot of pictures of him, because I've been I've been down this rabbit hole. And one thing, they're a secret society. They were a secret society. Like, they were supposed to be secret society. So that's why I guess it's not shocking that there's not a lot of photos, and you'll see the same pictures over and over again. But I think they've seen like 2 pictures of him. But that was the big guy at Briar Hill, the guy that used to kiss his pinky ring. And then after he died, and that's when Joey Naples took over. And if you guys remember too, Sandy Naples, his brother, that's who got shot at the house and by the Cleveland Mob that I went to. And I'm going to go to Joey Naples' assassination spot too, but he doesn't get, that's in the 90s. So we got to stay on oh, sorry. All right. Let's move on to Bob Kroner. I did have his picture up there. I think it's Bob Kroner and Swagger. I talked a little bit about Jimmy DeRose, who was the hitman for the Cleveland Mob. When he gets taken out, which is in Pittsburgh, that's where the FBI goes to investigate, and they find the tapes in the bread box, which I think is a great story. You have to, and Bob Kroner, if you guys, he talks a lot. I've seen so much of his. I'm gonna get him on the podcast, I think, but he was at the Phantoms game too on Friday. He talks a lot about the story, and he was looking around the house, and there is a bread box, and he looked in the bread box, and there was these tapes that were in there, unlabeled tapes. He didn't know what there was, so they went into the living area, the living space. They play the tapes, and lo and behold, he recognizes right off the bat Orly Fabia's voice talking. They don't recognize at first Jim Traficant's voice. They take the tapes back, and then when they listen to it and they realize that the other person on the tape is Jim Traficant, that's when they're like, oh my God, because at this point, nobody thought that he had his hands in the mob, which this is right at the beginning. So at that point,
not just Jim Traficant, Sheriff Jim Traficant. Traficant ran for sheriff in 1980. He actually ran against the machine and won. It was really an insurgent candidacy, for lack of a better way to put it, and he was elected sheriff. And obviously he had sat down with the Carabia brothers.
Yeah, you had to, right? And how from the Carabia brothers over $100,000. He also died $60,000. So and he says on tape, which we'll get to. So Kroner, they have the tapes. They're starting to follow the Pittsburgh side of the mob. I don't remember exactly if there's on the east side of Youngstown, which Briar Hill area I ran through yesterday. It all goes in together. East side, the Camel, and all of these stomping grounds are all close to the steel mills, right? Like everything that we're talking about, which is crazy. And almost every place that I visited, you can almost just see the steel mills in the background. So that's where the story takes place, which makes sense. That's where all the action went. That's where they went to get the numbers, the numbers bank. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, which is so awesome. Isn't it amazing that these buildings look exactly the same? I mean, you would think when I was younger to go past it, and even older, I would think it was sad. Like, what a rundown place that they haven't done anything to these buildings. And now in hindsight, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that they did not do anything to these buildings, because you could feel it, like just the history of all the stuff that used to go down there in them. It's crazy. I have a lot of a video of the places, but I'm going to be, they're going to be starting an app, the Youngstown Mob Group. Follow them on Facebook as well. Vince also does a podcast with them, the Vice Squad, that we'll hit with later. They're going to be starting an app where you can actually go and find all these mob spots or any of these historic spots and visit them yourself. And I'm going to be helping them launch that app. So I'm excited about that. I'm not supposed to be visiting any other places because I'm supposed to wait, but I can't help. So let's get back to the trial. So they have the tapes now. So they think they're going to get Jim Traficant, right? So they bring him in the office and they ask him, do you know the crap? Well, first, I think this is really awesome because this all plays in part of Jim Traficant's personality. first he says that when Jim Traficant comes in, they start building him up basically like, oh my God, we used to watch you when you played football. And he was like, oh yeah, he was like loving it, you know? And then they're like, oh, so have you been taking any political bribes or whatever? And he's like, no. He's like, do you know the Karavia brothers? And he's like, I know of them, but you know, I don't know them. And they play the tapes for him. And this is me telling the story, you guys. So this is all paraphrasing, you know. So take it. So they play the tapes for him, and Jim Traficant said, you know, stop the tapes. So they stopped the tapes, and they said that he crunched down all the way down into his chair. Now you guys have to remember, he was a big guy, like he's a football star. And they said he just scrunched, like he just goes all the way down into his chair. So they tried to get him to sign a confession, and I guess they're going back and forth. So he signs the confession. He has his friend waiting for him outside. He tells his friend, I am not working with the FBI. So at this point, the FBI, they're playing a cat and mouse game. Like they want Jim Traficant. They're meeting Jim Traficant at all these spots, and they're going to meet him. And they said Jim Traficant's almost in tears. Like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do this. And they're like, you have to do this. You have to do this. And then finally, they're like, if you don't do this, we are going to arrest you. And I think this is one of the best things about, and he says, you take your best hold and I'll take mine. And we all know what happens in Heinz. So he gets arrested, right? Then he decides to take a trial in Cleveland. He gets all the people from Youngstown to get on the jury. He convinces the judge that it wouldn't be fair, right, if there wasn't enough people from Youngstown. What do you think about all that?
And we have to note that he himself convinced the judge. Traficant defended himself, what's called pro se. That means that he did not have a lawyer with him. So he was the guy that was actually making this all happen. And it is nothing shy of remarkable the way it turned out, because he was found not guilty. He returned home to a hero's welcome. He effectively parlayed that into his career in Congress. It's just one of those things that kind of defies belief.
It does defy belief. When you break it down, it also makes a lot of sense, because he played the jury, the audience. He played the judge. He played the prosecution. He talked the language of the people. That's what he had on jury, or the people from Youngstown. Or the prosecution, on the other hand, was pompous. They said objection for everything that he said, and he had a way of turning the questions or getting things out there in the cross-examination, which I thought was brilliant. They talked to the jurors after, and they asked the jurors, "Do you think that he was guilty?" And they say, "Yeah, we do think he was guilty." But the prosecution was so mean that they didn't want them to win, you know? And that's what the name of that episode is the David and Goliath. And you could see that, and that's what he played. Oh, poor me. And he kept saying, like, well, I'm not going to beat the FBI. And he always would be like, well, what you're going to hear on these tapes is a lie. And he got people to think that the FBI was the bad guys. It's amazing. The jurors were crying at the end of the trial on the steps with him afterwards. He came out of the trial a hero of the people, because he said he did, he took, okay, so let's talk about what his defense was. His defense was that he did take the money, but he was taking the money to clean up the streets, right? Or he had to take the money.
He said it was a sting operation. He said, I believe his exact words were, the most unorthodox sting operation in the history of American justice. So, he said, yes, I took the money, but I took it as, part of this investigation. And he got the jury to buy it. But here's the thing about that. A year or two after the trial, by which time he was in Congress, the IRS said, listen, we don't care why you took the money, but it was never impounded as evidence, which means you have it and you never paid taxes on it. So they garnished his salary as a U.S. congressman for money for back taxes on bribes he had received as sheriff, if you can believe that. and after, and I mean, the IRS was a sworn enemy for Jim Traficant. From then on, he actually enacted or advocated for a lot of policies that kind of would, you know, I don't want to say defang the IRS, but definitely make them far less onerous.
Look at this clip real quick.
How are you gonna do? I don't know. I never looked. But I have showed up, and I'm going inside. Thank you.
He goes into the courthouse today with the attitude we all know so well. The same attitude he carried through his 1983 trial.
I'm going to fight those jackasses.
And again, the congressman pleads not guilty to the federal charges against him by reason of sanity, as he puts it. The 10 charges, including bribery, racketeering, and fraud, could land him more than 60 years behind bars. But even with that risk, he demands he be allowed to defend himself as his supporters pack the courtroom. You feel bad for him, sir?
I certainly do, young lady. Very much so. I hope to God he gets a break.
Courtroom spectators chuckle.
Isn't that crazy? Like, if most people, anyone of you talk to from Youngstown, absolutely loves this guy. I'm going to show you guys another.
It's clear how most of the jurors in Traficant's 1983 trial felt. It's clear how most of the jurors in Traficant's 1983 trial felt about him back then, eager to shake his hand outside the courthouse when it was all over.
We looked at every aspect of the trial, and there was no way that we felt that we could come up with any other verdict but not guilty.
18 years later, some describe it as a very stressful ordeal. Memories coming back as the congressman gets ready to go up against the government again.
Because it was just so hard. It was really rough.
Chuck Buttrick, a truck driver from outside Cleveland, gets quite emotional talking about it.
Every day it was different. You seen it. You seen the evidence today, and you say he's guilty. You see the evidence tomorrow. So wait a minute. There's a doubt.
In the end, Traficant completely wins this juror over, standing behind the 83 verdict despite the latest allegations.
The FBI is upset that they lost the last time, and I believe that they're still trying to get him. I want him to be free. He's a great man.
Similar thoughts from fellow juror Wanda Unruh of East Liverpool, who talked to us by phone.
Oh, I trust him. So you better live up to that, right?
Most of the jurors remember their trust of the congressman growing as they began to lose trust of the FBI, leaving behind skepticism that exists to this day.
Well, I know they're going to keep trying to find something on him. They don't give up very
easy. he looks like a good, what do they call it, scapegoat, you know, someone to beat up on.
Don Mumford from Warren did not want to go on camera for this story, but speaking to us just last year, predicted another victory for the congressman.
Nevertheless, I think he's going to come out squeaky clean.
Another Warren meeting.
It's really cool to look back at those old news clips, you know, to see that. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy that. I've been looking at a lot of them. So as you can see, like the jurors there, they loved him. They absolutely loved him despite everything that was going on.
Sure, that's. I mean, you know, there are lots and lots of people even today who feel like Jim Traficant wasn't guilty of anything that any other member of Congress wasn't guilty of.
Right, and at this point, the mob had their hand in everything. If you wanted anything you wanted, the judges, the sheriff, and everything. I thought that the police were people. Isn't that crazy?
Now, this was one of the things that came out in the late 90s. There were a whole bunch of investigations. There was an investigation, state audit of the Mahoning Valley Sanitary District, which uncovered a lot of missing money and led to some trouble for a guy by the name of Ed Flask. But at the same time, there was an investigation following the attempted assassination of Paul Gaines that led to just how prevalent the mob was in the court system, how, essentially justice was for sale in the Mahoning Valley.
I think that attempted assassination that you're talking about, which was 2 streets very close to where I'm at right now, which I went past the house. That was in 1996, I think.
Correct.
I mean that wasn't so. And there's an elementary school that's really close to here, and that's where they threw the gun out. And that just gives me the creeps when I think about it. After they tried to kill him, they were driving and they threw the gun there. Not the stories, like the stories that went down, the murders, the murders for hire, Joey Naples, we're going to get into Joey Naples. He was on the Pittsburgh side, and I think that Pittsburgh side basically towards the end was the only side left. Would you agree with the Naples and Strollo? I don't know.
Yeah,
Cleveland had a lot.
That's exactly what happened after the after the Danny Green bombing. Ronnie Carabia was one of the guys who went away for that, but there was a large investigative presence, state and federal investigators in the Cleveland area, and that led to a lot of people going to prison or flipping, and that weakened the Cleveland mob enough that the Pittsburgh mob could effectively take over the Mahoning Valley.
Which they did. And the effects go further than I can even believe. And like I said, like me not knowing that this is going on, but now knowing that people that Lenny Strollo murdered, my friend's father, and other things, which we should probably all know people, who knows. Lenny Strollo allegedly murdered. I think Mil D'Annunzio said that nobody in the mob really murdered anyone. They just had, or I don't think it was him that said, I'm not sure, but they had other people do all their dirty work, and Lenny Strollo didn't do much, but he flipped, and he ended up working for the, he ended up being a rat and working with the FBI at the end. I want to talk about Youngstown really quick, because for people that aren't familiar with Youngstown, and they think about where these mobsters could have lived. And I'm just talking about in just the city of Youngstown. I mean, I live in the suburbs of Youngstown. I live in Boardman. I've been living in Boardman for a long time. There's in the suburbs of Youngstown, it's just suburbia, right? It's like any other suburbia anywhere else.
Sure.
You go. Oh my God, I completely lost my thought here. What was I talking about?
Organized crime.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that the whole entire time. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's where I was going. Okay, so people, you have to understand there are areas where people would consider not the best area, with mansions that were beautiful in the north side of Youngstown. That's where these mobsters live, and I'm going to go past there and show you. There is mansions by Mill Creek Park too, like beautiful homes back in the day, where a lot of this went place. And Lenny Strollo, they lived in Canfield, and I'm not sure where Joey Naples was building his house at, where he got clipped at.
The family house was right by the north side pool. And I can't remember the street name of it, but it was definitely, this post-war, very ostentatious ranch type house. Joey Naples was building a house out in, I think it was Beaver Township, actually not that far from the Calamar, which was Briar Hill Jimmy's base of operations, right off the Turnpike exit on Market Street. So that's where he was building it, and obviously there was a cornfield across the street where somebody was waiting for him that one night.
Yes, they were. And what I love this is a good story that I like about this Joey Naples, is that he was a neat freak. And they say he usually always went with his henchmen or bodyguards people places. And they were working on his house because they were building it, and I guess he hated it. He would go there to clean up the debris after them. So he went there that night to clean up, like they would know that would be his routine. So he went there that night to clean up the debris. And this is,
I think they said he was down on the site, and he got mud on his shoes, and he stopped at the foot of the driveway to change his shoes.
Yes. And this is an unsolved mystery in Youngstown. Some people think they know who killed him.
Unsolved.
I'm not going to say it. Watch the show. This is a mystery. It's still not closed, right? It's an open case of who killed him. Interesting is we found some totes. You know the totes that you put over your shoes. Did you hear that story? Like the totes over the shoes. I'm gonna go there to the Joey Naples killing. Joey Naples, head of the Pittsburgh Mob. His nephew Jimmy Naples. I was on your podcast and they did on Mama. So,
yes, Jimmy is helping out on the is one of the producers on the podcast. He he definitely has far more technical knowledge on this than I do.
But he's a Steelers fan, though.
I mean, that's kind of a risk run in the Mahoning Valley.
Well, and I asked him that on their podcast when I was on their podcast. I asked him did that Cleveland and Mob did that have anything to do with what team you had to refer? Could you be part of the Cleveland Mob? They're like, that's a good question. I didn't think that would be a different question to ask.
Well, what's really funny is if you know anything about the origins of either of the teams, Art Rooney was, there was this idea that the people that owned these teams were sportsmen, and they were people who had an interest in seeing the sport succeed, and a lot of them were involved in, gambling or bookmaking or things like that. The original owner of the Browns was a guy by the name of Mickey McBride, who was, let's say, mob adjacent. He was actually called to testify in front of the Kefauver Commission when the Kefauver Commission came to Cleveland in the 50s. So both of the teams had, let's say, less than squeaky clean origins.
Well, I'm sure. Anywhere there's a lot of money, I'm sure the mob has their hands, or did have their hands.
Well, I mean, even at that point, there wasn't a lot of money in pro football. But the thing with sports was it was something that you could gamble on, and there was a lot of money in gambling.
Millions and millions of dollars in illegal, especially illegal gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Which, speaking of the Naples brothers, they ran I don't know if it's Youngstown, not Sheehan Tube. Youngstown Music? Is it Youngstown Music? I don't know why, but the old numbers.
That's what it is, but they were definitely into vending machines, which is a really good example of a kind of a business that was very conducive to mob activity because it was all cash. And if you watch casino, if they can walk into some place and walk out with cash, I mean, that's where they want to be. Mm-hmm. But that was, and in fact, that was one of the earlier mob wars in the late 30s and the early 40s. There was a war in the Youngstown area. The police chief in Youngstown in the late 40s and early 50s, Edward Allen, referred to it as the jukebox war because it was a war over revenues related to coin-operated machines like jukeboxes and cigarette machines and pinball machines.
That's that was in the All-American Club too, which is another famous spot at the All-American Club. It's also ran by the Pittsburgh Mob. And I also think it's crazy about the numbers bank. They used to run the numbers, and they would have guys run out, and it would just be like the lottery, right? And they would just, it'd be $1 or $2 bets, and it would make them so much money.
Not even $1. I mean, you were talking about days when you would bet a penny, a nickel, a dime, things like that, and they would get the number from, the source of the number varies by city. In some cities it was related to the pari-mutuel handle at one of the local racetracks. In his autobiography, Walter Cronkite told a story about how he was the every day in the newspaper he started out at would feature the number of stocks traded on the New York Stock Exchange or something, and he realized that he got it wrong one day, and his editor almost had a heart attack because he said that's where the mob gets the number from. So there are various places where they got the number, and you could play, like I said, for a nickel or anything like that. And, you know, obviously, like everybody played the bug in Youngstown. That's what they called the number there. Everybody played it. You know, a lot of people ran it. I mean, one of my cousins said that the first crib that he ever slept in was bought with proceeds from when one of his relatives hit on the number.
I want to show you guys really quick. I don't think
I am standing outside of Briar Hill, the famous Briar Hill, where the mob ruled in the late 70s, early 80s. This is where it went down, right over here. Jimmy Prado.
That's not what I wanted to show. But that is where the Pittsburgh mob used to hang out. I wanted to show really quick the Cleveland mob area. They used to hang out at uptown Isley's, the Crabia brothers, and they were telling stories about how.
Well, they were also brothers.
Well, yeah, so closer to the south side. Oh, the Crabias. With Struthers, Camel, all these eras, you guys are all like adjacent, kind of, and all close to the steel mill area. 1 second. Let's see if I have that real quick. Oh. Okay, yes, right here. This is one area. We talked about that and how the mobsters would come into this place with their Italian suits, and they said they would tip them. Now they tipped them $20, and at this time they were getting paid 75 cents an hour. So think about that. The mobsters coming in and throwing these guys $20 tips, and you're making 75 cents an hour. So they all were like looked up to, you know what I mean? Like, I know we're getting close to the time here. There is a couple quick things I wrote down that I thought was funny. We were talking about the trial that we didn't talk about, that Jim Traficant did. That is absolutely hilarious. They play the tapes of him taking bribes. The jury does hear the tapes of him taking bribes, right? So Jim Traficant, on all his like cross defense, he brings in a guy from, I don't remember, what was it called, Spotlight Records, which does polka. Like, it's like a Youngstown polka place or whatever. And the guy tells them, oh yeah, you can tell that these tapes aren't real or whatever. It's just funny, like the FBI brought the top of the level line of this witness. And Jim Traficant brought the guy from Youngstown that works at this place. And he brought this guy, and the guy that works down the street. But, you know, the jury was the guy from Youngstown that works at this place. So it was so easy for you to see where the jury would want to, you know, side with that guy. Do you think the judge had anything to do with that, Judge Aldridge? Or she might have got paid off or something?
No, I really don't. I mean, I feel like that, you know, most of there were a lot of county judges in a lot of different counties who might have been a little bent, but I feel like the federal judges were mostly straight arrows, because that's the thing. I mean, federal court is an entirely different animal than, you know, your local county common pleas court.
So would you say that it was Jim Traficant and his charismatic personality, and they said that he had a way with women, and my mom loved him, and I think that's another reason why I'm feeling so driven into the story, because this is a time when she was still alive. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'm like, this is right then, and it's her history, because she, you know, my grandparents, her dad, he came here to work at the steel mills. That's why they came here and immigrated here from Puerto Rico to come work at the steel mills, because it was a lucrative time then, and they wanted to make money. And she grew up as a little girl making a lot of money, you know, with her parents making a lot of money, to all of a sudden, when they lost 1979, well, my mom was, you know, 18 or 19 at that point, but her differently, you know what I mean? Like, in her era, Jim Traficant. Like, I can always remember talking to like, oh, Jim Traficant, you know, her and my aunts and everything like that. They just loved him. And people always say, if you talk to anyone that talks to Jim Traficant, they'll say They remembered your name. They remembered everything about you. He was that kind of person. I feel like that he made you feel seen, made you feel heard. And when the steel mills closed and Youngstown people felt like everybody abandoned them and everybody left them, and still, they were left with nothing. Jim Traficant comes, on his son of a truck driver, and saves and gives us hope, or gives the people hope and something. And I think that was part of what people loved about him.
That's it. I mean, there was, he was the closest thing that the Mahoning Valley had for a long time to a friend in high places, and I feel like there was a certain kind of appeal that, he did make people feel seen, and he understood there was a lot of anger in the Mahoning Valley after the steel mills closed, and he didn't just tap into it. You got a sense that he understood that. I mean, because he was from here, he grew up here, he knew what happened, he knew what was supposed to happen and didn't happen, and obviously there was this method. Every politician, every successful politician has a way to connect with people, and he was certainly no exception.
Vince, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I hope that you will come back on again and we can talk about more into this, because like I said, we didn't even touch much, It's just there's just so much.
There's so much to talk about. It is a very deep well from which to draw, right?
Yes. Tell us a little bit about the Vice Squad real quick. And are you guys still doing your pods, and where we can find those pods?
Sure. It's the Vice Squad, and we focus on elements of organized crime history in Northeast Ohio, a lot in the Mahoning Valley, but not exclusively in the Mahoning Valley. And we did our first season of 6 episodes last year, and that is available on YouTube and wherever else you might get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever. We are hard at work on the second season as well. So we're doing some writing. I mentioned the Kefauver Committee, and when they came to Cleveland, I did write an episode on that, and hopefully this will all be out before too long.
Absolutely. You can also buy your book at Barnes & Noble, Weird Moments in Cleveland Sports. I have a copy myself.
You came to see me at Barnes & Noble in Boardman.
You need to write Weird Moments in Youngstown. Your next back, yeah. Like this. I don't know which one's worse. I don't know which one could be.
That'd be a really long book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're both novels. Hey, listen, they'll both keep you in business. Let's put it that way. Well, let's write on. And I think they're also going to be starting to write some books on the Youngstown mob. So yeah, you can please check out all that. Great. There's so much good. There's good stuff out there, and I think I was going past these steel mills again, and I don't know if you noticed, in one of my videos, I was dying because I seen a couple people there taking pictures, and I'm like, what? Or like, is Cricket City, like, it's going to take over? I know, because it's that good, it's that interesting. You can't make up the stuff. That's why I'm so adamant about it. Like, the stories, it's absolutely amazing. If you do like Goodfellas, you like The Sopranos, you're gonna love the history of Youngstown. And I mean, Northeast Ohio all the way, in Pittsburgh too. Pittsburgh's pretty, all of them, right?
Well, if you remember the Sopranos, Paulie got arrested in Youngstown. He had made a pilgrimage to Dean Martin's hometown in Steubenville and got arrested for, I think it was gun possession in Youngstown, and so he was written out for a few episodes.
There you go. Which I probably would have been like, oh, that's so cool. They just said Youngstown. Why? Meanwhile, outside my house at Paul Gaines. New Year's Eve. It was Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Christmas Eve. I just watched the whole thing on that. But
The City Confidential?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's something.
Oh, I'll have to see that. I have been watching, like, I'm on like the Laguna Beach heist now too. Like, that's fascinating to me. The Bill Denzio and the burgling.
Yes.
But that's what we should talk about next. And Mel Denzio is still around, and I'm going to get him on the podcast.
Okay.
I just have a feeling. And I am going to get Frankie Suziani, too, who is in Cricket City and what was called The Younger Guys. And he comes in and works with Joey Naples in the 1990s. I talk to him about it like it's a movie. He comes in, no, this is real. Yeah. And he said he'd come on the podcast, too, to talk. I'm trying to keep it in order, I think that's the best way to understand the story, if you kind of try to stay a little bit in order of the years. Did you send me something?
Yes, I did. I sent you a link to the Youngstown City Confidential episode.
Okay. Great. I watched The Godfather. I've been watching everything. What's your favorite mob movie?
Probably The Godfather.
The first or the second one?
The first one.
Okay. Because there's a debate. People see it, like everyone says 3 sucks. I've never watched any of them. So I watched the first one. I haven't seen the second one yet.
The first and the second one are brilliant and of a piece and are very self-contained. The third one came about essentially because Francis Ford Coppola was broke and he knew that this was going to make some money, and it did. And it's one of those things. Mario Puzo wrote the screenplay for all 3 of them. And I heard a story when I was growing up, and unfortunately, there is no way for me to verify this, but that, Mario Puzo wrote all the books, or wrote the book from research. And I guess he was on the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson said, so tell me about some, what you learned in researching all this. And I was told that he talked about how there was this oversized mob presence in this little steel town on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. But he wrote this all from research, and if you've done enough mob-related research, you start to realize who everybody is. Michael Corleone is very clearly Bill Bonanno. The Don is equal parts Joe Bonanno and Carlo Gambino. And in The Godfather Part 3, that's actually probably the most oriented in actual history of all of the movies. Joe Mantegna's character is very obviously Joe Colombo, and there's a subplot about. I'm sorry.
Is that the New York crime family?
The Colombo crime family, yes.
Okay.
And there's a whole subplot about the Vatican Bank and Pope John Paul I that hews fairly closely to reality.
Shattered the Temple Church. Briar Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. I think about that too. Like, nuts. So, yeah, I want to talk over that. If you would think loosely, what would you think Youngstown history? If you would tell people, okay, would you say Youngstown history, you would compare it to The Sopranos, or would you compare? What would you compare it to most in pop culture for somebody who doesn't know?
That's a really tough question, and I'm not sure that I have a really good answer for you on that. I mean, I feel like there is, I seem to remember there was a jokey map of Ohio, and it talked about how much of it was corn, and it described Mahoning County as The Wire meets The Sopranos. And I feel like that is a really accurate description in a lot of ways.
I've never seen The Sopranos. I'm not going to watch it now, so I'm just going to read about it.
DVD now too.
Yeah, I don't know if I could watch it now because I'm just so interested into real life, true life, true crime. I'm all about true crime, and I know in Goodfellas, like the Pauly character, Joe Pesci? Is he Pauly? In Goodfellas, I don't know them that well.
Well, those were all based on real people. I mean, there really was a Henry Hill. Paul was I can't remember which crime family he was a part of. Joe Pesci's character was real. De Niro's character was real. So I mean, it was that the names were changed, but it was again taken from reality, and in fact, it was based on a nonfiction book.
Yes, because a lot of it reminds me of like the Joey DeRose stories. Like I want to talk about Joey, the hitman for the Cleveland Mob. He was just he just was and laughed and killed about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like they were like found people wrapped in duct tape and nuts. They killed his father by accident. Right? That's the one who they killed his father in Youngstown. They thought it was him, and it was his father, and his father was a great guy, and they picked the wrong guy, and that's what was wrong about the mob. And we're not glamorizing the mob, because that was the wrong part about it, and that's what people did not like. You know, not that they liked good parts about it, but
well, and that's like I said, that's, you know, I think everybody's okay with the mob as long as they subscribe to that idea that they only kill each other.
Right. Well, there's so many of it on like one of my posts about Mel D'Annunzio. That's the burglar of the Laguna Bay heist. That we shouldn't be like that. People are like acting like he's a local hero here in town. You know, and then the same people that, you know, you see that they love The Godfather and they love all these things. So what's the difference? What do you think? Is it just that because you're not allowed to be, am I not allowed to be fascinated by these people even though you watch this every day on television?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Say that again.
I mean, the people that get like offended that, you know, these people, oh, I think I'm losing. Do you hear me now? Sorry, I muted you.
There we go.
Okay, sorry. I accidentally pressed the mute button. That's the mute button's on there.
Sorry.
I was just saying that some people get upset when they think that you like, and like for example, here in Youngstown, like the Youngstown Phantoms, our hockey team had a Crooked City night where they invited Emil Dinzio and Bob Croner, and not everybody likes that. They think that it's glamorizing that these people are criminals, and, you know, and I get that to an extent, but at the same time, I was saying these are the people that love The Godfather and they love Goodfellas, and so I don't understand the difference.
Yeah, that is kind of a very fine distinction to make. I mean, the fact is that we enjoy works of fiction that do glamorize organized crime, and you know, The Godfather and Goodfellas, at least the first two acts of Goodfellas, certainly do that. So, you know, I don't know where you know, where the glamorization stops and, you know, the real acknowledgement of this as our history begins.
Right. And that's exactly what it is it's history. Can't change anything that happened. You know, this is what happened. And there's more to it than just the mobsters. And, you know, I think, you know, Jim Traficant and everything. And we'll have to talk more about his death, because a lot of people, big question is, did he die on a tractor? And you don't tell me what we'll save it. I don't want to know yet what you think.
Okay.
Don't say it. But it's really hard to believe. Hey, I don't know. Either way, he lived into his 70s, right? He was 7 years old. And Lenny Stroll was, when he died, he was 90 years, I think. He died in 2021. It wasn't that long ago.
Lenny and Orly and Ronnie Carabia, they all beat the over.
Yes. And yeah, and that, I think, and I do believe that the mob died with Lenny Stroll. I do believe it. People might say there might be still associates left around here and ties to, but there's no, I don't think there's no mob bosses or any made men left around in this area. I think that part's done, you know? So but people that are worried about me, I think I'm okay.
Well, there were, there aren't a whole lot of made guys in the Youngstown area anyway. I mean, it's you know, the estimate was that at its peak there were probably maybe 1,000 made guys in New York City, and we're talking like 60 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, the number would be a lot smaller for a city like Pittsburgh or Cleveland, and the number would be smaller even still for a city like Youngstown.
Yes. But there are still people alive. And there are people, and that's the thing about the Cricket City is, why are people comfortable to talk now? And this is 40 years later. Why are people talking about the mob now? Because it's over a little bit, not over completely, but it's safe, I think. And I do believe that's why people are talking more about it. It's a little bit more safe to talk about it because most of the people are gone. And I don't know. We're still more to find out.
I remember having this conversation with somebody, and I said, we're due for a mob war because there was always one every 15 or 20 years. And he says, there isn't a whole lot left to fight over anymore.
Well, the mob war is happening right now. It's called politics. It's called the presidential campaign. It's called Democrats versus Republicans. But I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, but nobody gets blown up in those.
Oh, true. Yeah, I know what you mean. They say every 10 years. Did you say that? That's when they come back.
Every 15 or 20 years or something. It's like the line in again, a line in The Godfather where Clemenza says you got to do something like this every 10 or 15 years to get all the bad blood out.
Yeah. One more question, I promise. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And were there any women involved in the mob as far as made women or anybody that did crime? Or were they only wives?
I mean, there were women that were involved. I mean, the best example is probably Virginia Hill, who was Bugsy Siegel's girlfriend. I believe she was somebody else's girlfriend as well, but she was actually called to testify before the Kefauver Commission as well, and she was definitely more than a girlfriend.
Yeah, I was just curious because you don't read about women. I didn't read about any women. I mean, it's we read about the girlfriends and the casualties of it, but you don't hear about women working with the mob and doing crimes. I think that, back in those days, the times were different then too,
Mm-hmm.
So I know they took care. They didn't even mess with the mob guy's woman. I know they did not touch their wives. That's for sure. That was one thing, but they probably wouldn't have done that. But that's interesting. I wonder if any were in history, if there was any, big mob, probably not in that days in the 70s and 60s and earlier, but who knows, now they would be. But anyways, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Anyone that's came and joined us. You can follow this whole entire story and everything that's going on at bougiesports.com. I don't just talk about the mob. I do talk about other things. Right now we're in the off season, but we have golf outings. We have the squad pod that comes on every other Tuesday.
I don't know. The free agency just started at 4:00 for the NFL.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Other things are happening. So please go ahead and subscribe. Check to bougiesports.com. And thank you guys for everything. Anything you have to say, Vince, before we leave?
No, thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I hope everybody learned something.
Me too. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Seriously. Bye, guys.